August 20th, 1984. This is Joe Todd, an interview with Mr. Houston Youngblood. Mr. Youngblood, where were you born?
I was born in Sequoia County in Indian Territory.
And when's your birthday?
September the 10th.
And what year?
Well, you don't have to tell that, do you? 1906.
1906.
1906.
Who's your father?
John Youngblood.
John Youngblood. Where is he from?
He was born in Arkansas.
Arkansas. And who was your mother?
My mother was Emma Baines, and she was a full-blooded Cherokee.
Was your father Indian?
Yes.
Was he?
I'm a little better than half.
Okay. Your mother was Cherokee, and you say your mother was Cherokee?
Yeah, my father was too.
Oh.
But he wasn't near as much as my mother.
Yeah. Okay. Where was your mother from?
She was born and raised. In fact, she and I and my grandmother was all born in the same house.
Where at in Sequoia County?
Well, would you know, north of Salisaw, about 15 miles north of Salisaw, in the country.
Between Salisaw and Stillwell?
Yeah,
That
that's
area?
right. That's right.
Okay. You say your grandmother was born in the same house?
Yes.
What was her name?
Her name was Anna Baines, but her maiden name was Mole, M-O-L-E.
And how do you spell Baines?
B-E-N-G-E.
B-E-N-G-E. Okay. Did you ever hear any stories about the Trail of Tears?
Well, my great-grandmother came over that, and I heard it handed down.
What did you hear about it?
Well, I just heard about the discomfort and the people that lost their lives coming over and the treatment that they got, because you know that the soldiers run them out of North Carolina. In fact, I have been to the Trail of Tears in North Carolina, which is the beginning of the Trail of Tears. And then I've also been over Tellico, which was the end of the Trail of Tears. So I have both sides of it, and I have the knowledge just handed down, and sometimes you can't always depend on what's just handed down from mouth to mouth. But anyway, they always said that my great-grandmother came over when she was a little girl, because I think she came over possibly in between 18 and 29 and 18 and 35. That's when the most of them.
Yeah. Hear any specific stories that they used to tell about the trail?
No, I don't know, except the hardships and things that I told.
What was your great-grandmother's name?
Well, her name was Mole, but I don't remember what her first name was. I don't know whether.
Okay. What kind of work did your father do?
He was a farmer.
Farmer?
Mhm.
Tell me about the chores you did on the farm.
Well, mostly we lived on a cotton farm, and we picked cotton, and we chopped cotton, and we grew almost everything that we needed, except we would buy salt, flour, coffee, sugar, and pepper. And actually, that's just about all we had to buy.
How many pounds of cotton could you pick in a day?
Oh, man, I've done well to get 150 pounds. Because we picked it, we didn't pull it.
Yeah, you didn't pull bowls in?
No, we picked it.
Okay. When would you pick cotton? What time of year?
Well, usually start in September, and usually around the middle of September, and then if you didn't get all your cotton picked, while we pull that, they would, and they'd bring it into the house, and then we kids would sit around and pull the cotton out around by the fire.
How much did you get paid for the cotton? What at the gin? What was the price of cotton?
Oh, I think perhaps not more than 11 cents a pound. Because I remember after World War I, or during World War I guess, cotton went up to about 22 cents a pound, you know. And, that was really something, but we only had about 1 year of that.
How big is a cotton sack?
Well, you could get them, they come in length. Now, they were all the same size, probably the width of this table.
About 3 feet?
Yeah, but you could get them in different lengths. You could get them clear up to about 12 feet. And, of course, it took a big man to pull one that long.
So you have a strap that went over your shoulder, or what?
Yeah.
What size was the sack you carried?
Well, I carried about an 8 foot, I guess.
Besides picking cotton during the war, what else did you do for the war effort in World War One?
Well, of course, I was very young at that time, and I just remember that my stepdad went and borrowed money in order to buy Liberty bonds, and we finally paid him out. But he had to borrow the money to buy Liberty bonds. That's what they were called then, weren't they, in World War One?
Do you have an allotment?
No, I was too young. Now I'm registered over there and I'm a voter, but I don't have allotment. My mother did.
Yeah.
But I was too young.
Where was your mother's allotment?
In Sequoia County.
In Sequoia County. How did they figure up who got what piece of land when they allotted the lands?
Well, usually these people lived on this land, you know. But for instance, my uncle, he claimed all the land that he could ride around in one day, horseback, see, and he even had tenants. But when they cut him down to 160 acres, see, well, that was just like your backyard, you might be. But mostly, they picked their allotment. Now, I had 2 brothers, not brothers, but uncles, and I had 3 of the girls, and they all, with exception one, took their allotment right around my grandmother. My grandmother's allotment was here, and then my aunts and my uncle picked their allotments around, and most of them joined, and that was ideal if they could do that.
Yeah. So if you lived on the land, you could take that as your allotment.
You could ask for that, and you usually got it.
Okay.
Because I remember that we had one aunt that she couldn't get the land that she wanted, so she filed out in around Muskogee. And she was the only one that ever got oil on her land. She filed out by Shakota.
When did you start school?
I started school, I guess, in about 1912. I went to a one-room schoolhouse.
What was the name of it?
Camel School, Camel, CMP, Camel District, number 9, I believe it was. But you want me to tell you the nickname?
Yeah.
The nickname was Scratch Out. There was a couple of ladies got into a fight up at a box supper one night, and ever after then it was named Scratch Out.
What were they fighting over?
Some man, I suppose.
What was your teacher's name?
Oh, I had the one that I remember the most, and I think that taught me the most and gave me some ambition. He told me what I could be if I wanted to be, and his name was Price. P-R-I-C-E, Price. But let me tell you a story about my grandmother during the Civil War.
Sure.
Well, they lived at that same place that I'm telling you about, and that was right on the border, you know, between the North and the South. And some of my folks fought in the South, and some of them fought in the North. In fact, my grandfather was wounded in the Civil War, and he came back home, but he never got over it. But what I was intending to tell you, that they were right there in between those, and every time the armies came by, or the renegades, whichever one they were, why, they stole all their cattle, all their hogs, all their chickens, and everything they had to eat. They stole it, you know, and drove it off. Well, they came by one time in the late fall, and usually they would have knowledge that one of the armies was coming through. And so when this army came through, they drove off all their stock and everything and burned their house down. Well, in the meantime, they had taken some clothes, some pots and pans, and took off into the woods. And they lived in the woods all winter long. And my grandmother said they lived on roots and plants, and she even told me that they would peel the bark off a tree and get the grubs out of there and eat them. Can you imagine that? And anyway, they were afraid to come back because they would come back in sight and the house was gone. And the date on that chimney was 1776, and it was written in on a big rock. It was carved in a big rock, and it was carved in Cherokee. And the date, I always know that they told me that the date was 1776.
Why that date?
Well, that's when they first went there.
In 1776?
1776.
Huh, I didn't think they came till the 1820s during the removal.
Well, you got to understand that some of the Indians came over here even before 19 and 20, way before then.
Yeah.
But now this date could have been somebody else's house.
Yeah, okay.
At that time. But the reason that I remember that date, because when our family all moved away, one of my cousins went back and took out that plaque.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose, as far as I know, he still has it.
Yeah, okay. What was your grandfather's name?
Columbus.
Columbus Benj?
Columbus Benj.
The one that was wounded?
Uh-huh.
Where was he wounded?
I don't even know.
Which side did he fight for, north or south?
He fought for the South.
Would he have been with Stand Watie's group?
I think so, because Stand Watie was the only Cherokee general that's ever been, the only Indian general that's ever been.
So he would have been with him when he surrendered at Fort Townsend then.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
But my grandmother died in 1914, and she was 56 years old. So you can figure out she was born, what, about 18 and 58, something like that?
She was 56?
Yeah, in 1914.
Yeah.
I think she was born in 18 and 58.
1858.
1858.
Yeah.
So she goes quite a long ways back.
Yeah. Right. Okay.
But my family, part of them had been over here a long time, but that goes way back that I don't even know them, because the only ones that I know about is just my grandmother and my grandfather, just a very little about him, because all of my knowledge was just handed down, from mouth to mouth, and sometimes that gets exaggerated or distorted, over a lot of years, and sometimes you forget.
Mm-hmm.
And I do remember that my grandmother's house had 6 bedrooms and 5 chimneys. And we didn't have any stove or anything, and we cooked. We did have a great big cook stove, but we didn't have any heating stoves or anything like that, because we had, as I say, we had 5 chimneys, and that's the way we kept warm.
Did ever hear any stories about Baptist Mission? And Jesse Bushyhead?
Oh, Jesse Bushyhead was one of the Bushyheads was chief of the Cherokees. You remember that?
Yeah, that was Jesse Bushyhead, wasn't it?
Yeah, he was our neighbor.
Yeah. The one I'm thinking of came over the Trail of Tears.
Well, then this must have been his son or his grandson.
Okay. The Bushyhead home is still standing up there at just north of Westville. Is that Watts? Or
Westville, yeah.
Yeah, just north of Westville there is where the Bushyhead home standing. Did you know the chief, Bushyhead?
Yes.
What was he like?
I just knew of him.
Yeah.
He was kind of a large guy, and he was a round face, and he was built kind of like most of the Indians, except he was a little larger.
Mm-hmm.
And their statue, they're kind of stocky and short, a lot of them.
Mm-hmm.
But he is the only one that I remember. Now, it might be that I never saw him or anything, but the knowledge that I have is just handed down.
Yeah.
And he lived just a few miles from our house.
Mm-hmm.
And you know about Sequoia?
Yeah.
Well, Sequoia's home is just across the fence from my mother's place.
Okay.
And I don't know that they ever knew him or not, but his cabin and everything, you know where it is.
Yeah.
It's just across the creek and across the fence from
You
my...
ever heard any stories about Sequoia?
Well, just that his name was Guest, wasn't it?
Yeah.
G-U-S-T?
Yeah. George Guest.
George Guest. Well, there's one that I used to think it's probably prevalent, but he wore a gunny sack around his head for a turban. And someone asked him why he did that. He said, well, somebody might give him something. If they did, well, he'd have something to carry it. I thought that was kind of funny.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I had a good life, and my mother and father were separated when I was real young, and each one of them married again, and I went with my mother. And I have 3 half-sisters and 2 half-brothers, and all my half-sisters and 1 brother has got college education.
How far did you go through school?
I went to the 10th grade.
10th grade. Mm-hmm. Tell me about the Depression of the 1930s. What were you doing then?
Well, in the Depression in 1930, I was married and had 1 son.
Where were you living then?
I was living at Carnegie, Oklahoma.
How come you moved from the eastern part of the state?
Well, my family moved to Cushing one time.
Mm-hmm.
And my stepdad had a job there, and he lost his job. And in the meantime, I had went to work in a dime store, sweeping out after school. And when my family left, when we could no longer make a living, we had to go back to our own farm. Well, when my family left, this manager of this store told me that he liked my work, and he could ever use me, he'd let me know. And so, several months later, I get a letter from him telling me to come, that he had a place for me, and he was going to pay me $12 a week. Well, you know, I thought of, man, it won't be long till I'll have all the money in the world cornered at $12 a week. But I went to work for him.
What kind of work was it?
It was in a 5 and a dime store,
Mm-hmm.
and I never was out of a job, and I never worked in any other profession. And I finally wound up with TGNY, and I was an executive with TGNY for several years.
Mm-hmm. When did you go with TGNY? What year?
38.
When did that start? When did TGNY begin?
In 1930.
1930.
Yeah, it started at Kingfisher.
Yeah. What are the men's 3 names? Is it? Heard one was Thompson,
Thomason, Goslin, and Young.
Mm-hmm.
And the way they arrived at the name, Thomason was the oldest, Goslin was the next one, and Young was the youngest. So that's where they got their TGNY.
Mm-hmm. And the first store was in Kingfisher.
Uh-huh.
And where did you begin working for them?
I was here at Woodward. I was working for another firm, and they bought that firm out.
Mm-hmm.
And I always said that I never was out of a job, but I was with 2 companies that were bought out, and I just went with the fixtures.
Yeah.
I just stayed with the store.
Mm-hmm.
And that's.
What was the name of the store that TGNY bought out?
It was Woolworths, W-A-L-B-E-R-T-S, Woolworths. It wasn't very big. It wasn't very well known.
Okay. And you stayed with TGNY until you retired?
Until I retired.
Mm-hmm. And your first job with them was just a clerk?
Well, just sweeping out.
Just sweeping out?
Yeah.
Here in Woodward?
No, my first job with them, I was manager. I was manager of my first store when I was 17 years old.
Okay. That was in Cushing?
No, that was at Pawhuska. Because I was single, and I could get up and move. And so I was at about 11 different towns before I made it to Woodward.
Mm-hmm.
But the company that I worked for at that time, Woodward was the best store they had. And every time I hit the ground, I asked for Woodward. And I finally got it. But at that time, it was the best store they had.
Yeah.
And I wanted it, and I finally got it.
And what year did you arrive in Woodward?
In 1937.
1937.
Mm-hmm.
Were they still having the dust storms here in 37?
Oh, yes. But see, I was living down there. The dust storms down there were just as bad, almost, as they were
Tell me
here.
about the dust storms.
Well, actually, it would be kind of decent, and you'd look out and you'd just see, it just looked like a large black cloud. That's what it looked like. And then pretty soon it rolled in. And then when it rolled in, it just blotted out almost everything, because in my store, when one was coming in, we used to cover up our counters at night. And I used to cover up my counters before the dust storm got there. And should I have a customer, well, I knew where everything is, I'd just go reach under the cover and get the merchandise and sell it to them. But it lasted a long time. And I remember one of the cafes where they couldn't serve meals. on account of the dust. So they made up sandwiches inside of a drawer. They made them and wrapped them in a napkin. And you come in and you ordered a sandwich, and they just reach back there, open that drawer and run their hand in there, open it just enough, and then get that sandwich out. And they couldn't serve you coffee because of the dust, but they could serve you cold drinks. And they would bring it to you and pull the cap off right then and there, see? And that's the way they served you your meals. Now, not all of them. Now, I don't guess the dust blew every day, but sometime during the day it would blow a little bit, and during the week it would blow a little bit.
How long would one dust storm last?
Well, gosh, I couldn't tell you. It seemed like to me for off and on for weeks and weeks, and months, I guess, because...
How would you keep the dust out of your home?
Well, you didn't. You closed all your windows down, and you pulled the blinds down, and you couldn't keep it out because it'd silk through under your windows, under your doors, and there's just no way of keeping it out.
Well, how'd you breathe in dust storms?
Well, I have used a wet cloth. If it just got so bad that I would use a wet cloth.
What about World War II?
World War II?
Mm-hmm.
Well, I was in World War II. I was a soldier, and I have one son, and he was about 16 at that time, and I had a store here in Woodward, and my wife was capable of running the store. In fact, she had run the store when they were sending me off somewhere else, and we had talked about it, and if I wasn't called by a certain time, I was going to enlist, because I guess I was old-fashioned because I believed in patriotism. But anyway, I was called before the time came, and so I went into the Army, and I guess I was about 37 years old, something like that. But anyway, I never did go overseas, because every time I'd get on a shipping order, on account of my age, they would pull me off. So when I got to POE out by Washington, D.C., they put me on the cadre list.
What's POE?
Port of Embarkation.
Okay, yeah.
And the cadre, is the permanent non-commissioned officers that are on that. But anyway, I guess I probably had the best gold-bricking job in the Army because I was postmaster. And that is it. And the whole time that I was stationed up there, well, I was postmaster, and I was on duty 24 hours a day, but I didn't have duty all that time because I could get somebody to take my place for a while. But I didn't appreciate the Army, and this is one of the reasons I didn't. I went to school for 16 weeks, and I learned how to telegrapher, and I learned how to operate a switchboard, and I learned radio, communications, so forth. But the thing that bothered me, I never learned anything that would help me in civilian life. And then when I got out of the Army, I got out of the Army in September, and my son went into the Army in January the next year.
Yeah.
My son is a doctor. But I'll tell you one story that happened to me in the Army. I was acting officer, just acting, information. And when these bulletins would come down to our company, well, they would come to me. And then I would read them before the troops every day when they come in for lunch. I would read them the news and tell where all the armies were and so forth. But the thing I remember most, one day I got a little envelope. I just got a little envelope, and it had 4 little flags in it, just about the size of a postage stamp. And they were fastened on a... Just a minute.
Okay.
But anyway, in this envelope was these 4 little flags. And all it said on the envelope was keep these. And so when when they dropped that bomb on Hiroshima, well, my instruction was to place that toothpick. I had a great big old relief map, on the wall, and I was to place that toothpick and that flag on that place. And then when they bombed Nagasaki, well, I was supposed to place that flag on there. And to this day, I've always speculated and wondered where the other two were going.
Yeah. One last question. How bad was the tornado of 1947 here in Woodward?
Well, you want personal?
Yeah.
Well, we lived in the north part of town, and my wife had just been to Oklahoma City that day, and she was quite a hand for shoes, and so she bought her a new pair of shoes. So we were sitting in the living room, and she was trying on her shoes to show them to me, and she just had on one shoe when the tornado hit. It was a terrible roar, and she went to the front door to see, and she opened the door, and she told me, she said, "I can't get the door closed." So I went up, and I just put my arms around her. And the door, we finally got it almost closed. Then the door blew open, and it broke some fingers on my hand, but it broke my wife's back in 2 places. And then it blew us out into the yard. And we were out there under a great big old tree, and I think I would pass out, and then I'd wake up and I'd feel around till I found my wife. And she told me she was hurt. So I said, "Well, you put your arms around me, and I'll crawl up the street." And that's what I did. She put her arms around me. She was on my back, put her arms around me. And I crawled up the street till somebody found us. They took us to Moreland, and to this day I don't know who it was. It took us.
How big was that final cloud? Did you ever see it?
I didn't see it because
Yeah.
we was in the house.
Yeah.
And when we knew what was happening, it was too late to do anything.
Yeah. Okay, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.